Okay, so our final speaker for the session, great pleasure to introduce my colleague, Wendy Goodridge, who, as you've already heard from today, has been here from the very beginning, before the Egypt Centre opened as the Egypt Centre's, well, the museum's first volunteer, before it was even called the Egypt Centre. And Wendy is very, particularly has an interest in breaking down barriers and museum education. So the talk that she's going to be presenting today is called Let the Battle Commence, Breaking Down Barriers in Museum Learning, of which Wendy has been instrumental in making happen over the last 25 years. So over to you, Wendy.
Thank you for that, Ken. Okay, well, this very short presentation, obviously I can't tell you about everything about museum learning, so I'm going to focus on our schools programs mainly, okay? So, of course, you've already seen this photo. This is showing the official opening that day. However, our journey begins before this, because in February 98, before we officially opened, I had our very first school. And here you see Carolyn doing the tour. Because at the time, it was Carol and myself doing the tours with some very enthusiastic volunteers you've already seen. And I want to thank my predecessors for these talks because they've actually set a lot of groundwork in for what I'm going to explain. Okay, so we had 24 schools already before we officially opened. And I said it was simple tours, simple worksheets. And we used to post, no email in those days. We used to post everything out to the teachers. We did have problems because they would turn up with all the work packs for Swansea Museum instead of us, but still. So we soon thought we'd change that. We wanted to increase our offer, so I had a few meetings with local primary schools. One in particular was very keen to work with us to tell us what they wanted, you know, what did they want from us? So they went through the curriculum with us at the time, and this was the curriculum in England and in Wales. And they wanted, of course, to do mummification. They wanted to know the story of the discovery of Tutankhamun. So we did an amazing exploring activity for them. They wanted to know all about the gods. They wanted to know about Egyptian writing, obviously. And of course, we used materials and Senate because they wanted to know a bit about daily life in Egypt. Now, we thought, right, we want to make this as hands-on as possible. And it was all museum-led, which was very labour-intensive, but the teachers loved it. You can't expect them to be experts in every single field, so they loved coming to us. As time went by, we introduced even more activities. So we did food and drink, and this was all based on our collection, looking at what we had on display. We had lots of offering trays showing food and drink. So we used all things like that. One thing they really wanted was pyramids. And I thought, we haven't got any. We don't know how, you know, tiny little bits. But now we finally, this year, launched a pyramid activity that Luke Keenan, one of our education staff, really worked hard on. And he's really chuffed that's now been launched. Now we've got so many activities. Teachers have to choose 3 from life, 3 from death. And then we prepare the packs for them before they arrive, just to make sure it's all right. And again, very much hands-on. So how many schools have we hit since, you know, how many have visited us? We've had over 67 children since that February date, 2,512 bookings of schools you know, coming engaged with us. However, it wasn't plain sailing and we had lots of challenges on the way, but they cut the opportunities, couldn't they? The very first one was the big whammy. And Carolyn, I did cry, didn't I, with this one? Was 2000. We had just had all new costumes done. We had our new mummy, super duper mummy. And we were told that the topic of ancient Egypt was going to be removed from the curriculum. I did write a nice letter to Tony Blair, but I have got a reply actually upstairs. But I thought, right, we've got to sit down, we've got to do this. So we contacted ACAC. We had a huge box delivered, because as I say, it was all postal in those days, of every single curriculum subject to go through. So we researched all of this. Now thinking about, we can't do subject matter, what can we do? Well, they wanted to know about skills-based learning, a skills-based program. So we thought, right, we'll concentrate on their attainment targets and the skills that they needed to cover. We looked at each subject in turn, and we were thinking about more of a cross-curricular link. However, we made sure that the collection and our displays were at the centre of all of this. So for each of the little booklets we had for each subject, we went through for ideas that we could use. So introduced a brand new teachers pack, brand new learning program, launched every single description of the activities that we were going to offer. I put the common requirement symbols there to give these teachers an informed choice of what we were covering. And actually the feedback that we had was that the schools actually felt supported by us in this change. It was a big change for them too. And we thought, we really want you to carry on. We did see schools saying, sorry, Egypt's no longer in the curriculum. We won't be coming to you anymore. We're going to go and do the Romans and the Celts instead. But we did have schools, just an example of St. Joseph, saying that because of the hands-on element and how we brought this subject to life, and we were covering obviously a skills-based curriculum, they were going to continue, and so did many other schools. We actually at this time saw a massive increase in secondary schools coming to us, especially to do mathematics, art, religion. We had science and technology days. And I want to tell you a little bit about mathematics. Merlis has already been mentioned. Merlis, thankfully, we were so blessed. She was an ex-maths teacher at a local comprehensive school. Merlis actually taught me, and I went to the school that she taught at. And Merlis worked with me on a new Egyptian-themed mathematics program, which was an all-day session for primaries, all-day session for comps. Went right up to Key Stage 4, age 16. We covered, all the attainment targets that they wanted. And if you go upstairs later on during your lunch break or in the wine reception, go and have a look in the gallery in High Life and see the maths cases dedicated to Merlis. We were so inundated with maths schools. We decided that it was such a popular topic for our schools that we did this travelling maths exhibition that Carolyn's already mentioned. And with it came an accompanying booklet that with all the activities to do for each of the display boards, and 14 boards were produced. Now, Professor Truman was so excited about this because one of his students, an ex-graduate of maths in Swansea, Anna Elkin, she was a teacher in a local primary school, Birch Grove Primary School. She worked hard with me on the maths programme, especially with the dreaded attainment targets. So she was invaluable there. And she came to the launch, Professor Truman. He loved it so much, he ordered a spare set of display boards. And if you go to the maths department, the corridor leading to the maths department was 22 years. It's still up on that corridor. You must go and look at it. I was chuffed when I found it. Big change number 2 is for our younger school visits. The Welsh government introduced something called the foundation phase, and it was mainly learning through play. And one of our staff, Jane Holly, who was the education officer at the time, worked really hard with all local schools. It was new for them. And we offered a half-day session or a full-day session for our younger visitors. So for the age 3 to 5, it was all through play, no worksheets. And Jane, actually, she trained all staff. We all actually had to have sort of compulsory training on this. And we developed a whole new play area. Just to let you know, Carolyn was not pleased, but yeah, it was when they discovered the musical instruments box, wasn't it? Yeah. Foundation phase 2, teachers had more choice with this. This was a full day session and the children absolutely loved it. So that was ongoing. The biggest change we've had has been more recent. It's only launched as a statutory requirement to schools this September. And its main aim, the 4 purposes are the main aim of the curricula. And it's saying that the curriculum in Wales will create these ambitious, capable learners, these enterprising, creative contributors, the ethical, informed citizens, and the healthy, confident individuals. This curriculum, when you study it and look into it, it's actually a gift for museums, and for organisations who want to engage with schools, because now all curricula is decided at school level. And as long as you're covering the areas, because one area that they've really included is well-being. This is a massive thing in the curriculum now. So Hannah Sweetapple, who was our learning and engagement officer, she worked really hard with the Welsh Government and with a group of education and museums. She set up all external training for all learning staff, and we were able then to launch the very first curriculum offer to schools in Wales. We were the first in Wales to do this. And the teachers pack that Hannah created with the learning team is actually held up as an example of best practice by the Welsh Government during their training programme, which is run by GEM for museum professionals. And this mindfulness session at the museum is not only, this wellbeing is not only for children, adults, we use it for adults as well. And this week, I was contacted by the National Museum in Barcelona for help with them setting up theirs, because they'd seen on the museum's network that we'd launched this. Big challenge to everyone, not just Swansea University, obviously, was the pandemic. Overnight, March, we were all sent home. Overnight, all our schools cancelled. No engagement. What are we going to do? But what an opportunity this was to gain skills for online engagement. And our online engagement actually went through the roof during this time because we didn't really bother with online engagement for schools. We didn't need to. They all wanted to come in. So Hannah and the learning team created a whole new project. They started doing the research in June and it was launched in the September. They all made from at home, they made the videos at home with the different learning team, doing activities, giving step-by-step instructions for teachers. They then did all the post-session activities. They created all sorts of downloadable resources for teachers. And then the teachers would book, then they'd have their live session booked. And that was either over Zoom or Teams or whichever way the school wanted it. And absolutely brilliant. We had amazing feedback from this, and the schools were very grateful that we had this online engagement provision for them. However, since the pandemic and all the restrictions have eased, we have had a decrease opt-in for this this method of visiting us. However, we have seen a wider geographical range, so schools in England and further afield. And we've also noticed schools saying that they'd like to do this because they're thinking of the environment, thinking of travel costs, you know, so it cuts costs as well. So it is useful to keep this. So staff learning team is still trained and they still offer this, which leads on to economic challenges, you know, for money, cost, and thinking of the environment and social challenges that we have. We've always run workshops. Carolyn showed some images of the workshops holding up all their certificates. But we knew that there were certain areas in Swansea and South Wales and wider that weren't able to come to us for the workshops. They couldn't afford them. They couldn't actually, you know, get you. They were perhaps put off by the barriers and everything else, the psychological barriers. They weren't good enough to come on a university campus. And we wanted to normalise life on the university as a welcoming place. So we realised that if we wanted to offer this, we needed to have a free workshop. We needed to pay for a packed lunch for the children, because these were children had free school meals. We needed to provide the transport. We could only afford a minibus, and luckily we were asked by the New Opportunities Fund to pilot this scheme. We did a 9-month pilot with them. Actually, it was January 2002 we did the pilot, but we launched it then in the September, and it ran until 2020. The New Opportunities Fund only paid for us to run this for 3 years, and plus the pilot session. So after that, we were fundraising, and that's actually one of the reasons why Carolyn cycled down the Nile. We actually raised quite a few £1,000s towards this for doing that. But then the university realised the engagement that we were doing, and they paid for the staff, they paid for the buffet, and they paid for the transport. So that was brilliant. And of course, the last day it ran was when we were closed down. That was the last time. We targeted schools, as they were called then, in community first areas. They're now called Women 40 areas, which is the Welsh index for multiple deprivation, the highest 40th percent of deprivation. There are lots of areas in Swansea and wider afield that we needed to target. Throughout that time, because only 14 children could come because of the minibus, We held it over 2 Saturdays a month, and it went through the school year. So it started in September and it finished in July. We had 28 schools consistently over those years, those 18 years, from Community First, and now WIM 40 areas, 5 organisations in the area. 8 schools did participate over the 18 years that weren't in a Community First areas, but they were put on a waiting list, if we had any gaps in the month. So we did hit our target of reaching the hard to reach areas. The condition of coming free, whatever, the teachers would provide data on a monitoring form. And this was the data that was needed by the New Opportunities Fund. But we carried on collecting this to make sure we were hitting our targets. And you can see that we did have over half of the children were socially and economically disadvantaged. And they were children that were underachieving, and they needed this to have their self-esteem boost and their confidence boosted. Since the pandemic, we've had to redesign, rethink our practices with this. We can no longer continue with minibus, lunch, things like that, but we can still hit targets. So instead of it being in person now, it's going to be online. It's going to be actually our virtual classroom. Instead of 14 children, we can hit 150 children at each session. And instead of having 4 members of staff, we had to have 4 members of staff because some of these children had challenging behaviour. Now there'll be the 1 member of staff with a volunteer that can lead the online session. And of course, we don't need the transport. These are children that will have the free school meals at school, and everything will be provided at the school. The other thing we will do is we've got loan boxes with replica artifacts and things that will go out to the school that's participating that month. So we wanted to find out if we were hitting our targets. And one of the targets was to increase confidence in children. And we had 1 school involved who gave us information of a child that had actually a life-changing experience towards learning because their confidence was so increased. This child couldn't work unaided. They had to have a more able child to motivate them to continue to work. After attending the 2-week course, she, of course, had a certificate to prove she was a young Egyptologist. So she stood on a chair in assembly, not just the whole class, to assembly, and told them all that she'd learnt. And there was no holding her back after that. And Helen, the primary teacher, actually told us it sort of created a monster, really. She was insisting that Helen would take her to Egypt one day with her. But we wanted to know if attitude to learning, again, the previous child showed that as well with her increased confidence. Pauline Buss brought the very first class. This is a picture of the very first class that attended the workshops, and they absolutely loved it. And Pauline was involved every year since. Child B became one of our volunteers. Pauline knew we had child volunteers, and she said, would you take a child that, from this sort of area? Of course, we would love to have this child to volunteer. Went on to be an adult volunteer, went on first in their family to get a degree. And more importantly, they were the first in the family to break the cycle of poverty. And they left, they left. They didn't just stay in that community all the time. So that was a really plus. She was very proud of him. So obviously, motivation to achieve, to improve that. Mr. Atkins from Gorse Community School, another one that was always highly involved with us. He said that there was evidence of developing high success rate and motivation with pupils. So we were very pleased about that. We didn't need anyone to tell us about the improved self-esteem. We could see that for ourselves, especially in the award ceremony. On the second Saturday, an invite was sent to all parents, teachers, to be invited to come and see the children's award ceremony. Each child was called up in turn, their certificate, handshake, given their certificate. For some children, it was the very first time they achieved a certificate. So it was amazing. And to watch them show their family round in the galleries. I remember one instance where, sorry if I go on a bit, Ken, stop me now. I remember grandparents going around with one child, they were going, shh, don't make a noise, we're in the university, we're in the museum, shh. And he said, it's all right, Nan. It's a fun place to be. You're allowed to laugh and joke and make a noise. So it was a learning curve for the parents and grandparents as well. So that was great. We were also chosen to showcase our young Egyptologists with some royal visitors. It was Prince Charles at the time, and Clive Atkins was he was so pleased because we chose Gorse Community School, and Clive Atkins came along. You can see him there with the red tie, but they absolutely loved it. Now, we've had a lot of recognition. Carolyn's already said about being shortlisted for the Times Higher Award for widening participation, and part of this was the Young Egyptologists workshops along with the volunteers. But we were also used as a case study for good practice of widening participation in the Baroness K. Andrews report, Culture and Poverty. We hope to continue the next 25 years the civic mission of Swansea University and champion museums change lives and that universities change lives. This university museum is a really powerful tool to engage with communities and break down these barriers. It also strengthens community bonds. You can see that in the intergenerational work that the volunteers do. But it also generates pride in this community, and definitely we've seen a change in attitude, not just towards what a university is, to what a museum is, but a change of attitude to learning. So thank you very much.